listening to Turtle Island News with Tracey Kennedy. So, how you guys doing? Hope you're doing good today. We're of course live on turtleislandnews.info, Revolution Radio, Studio A. Good morning, everyone. And the Awake Radio Group. I'm going to have some tea. My throat is killing me. We finally got a bit of a break here from all of the heat. Esoteric? Anyone? You know, when I look at the news, I just have to shake my head. There's this thing I found. It's on the page too. If you want to go and look at the news for the last couple of days, please go to turtleislandnews.info. There's this map. Starts off with actually two maps today. And it's a puzzling artifact, mostly because it's called the map of their creator. And it's caused a lot of controversy in the scientific community. Now, several years ago, 1999, a team of Russian scientists stumbled upon this mysterious stone slab that was covered with a relief map of the Ural area, the region. And we've talked about this. That's where they're finding some pretty ancient stuff. Now, at first, experts thought that the map was only around 3,000 years old. However, it was later established to be about 120 million years old. So how's that possible? The dating seemed to be unrealistic because no one could have created a map with such detail at the time. However, scientists who examined this map concluded it must have been created by an unknown advanced civilization that was present on the Earth millions of years ago. It was difficult to determine even the approximate age of this slab. At first, the radiocarbonic analysis was carried out, and as we've talked about before, it's problematic at best. But afterwards, levels of the slab were scanned with uranium chronometer, and through the investigation showed different results each time. The age of the slab is still unclear. So basically, we don't know the age of this thing. And while examining the stone, two shelves were found on its surface. It's like a book, but it's so old that it could have been closed shut from age. Now, the age of one of them is about 500 million years old. The second one is about 120 million years old. So, namely, that age was accepted as a working version, although with the names of the stones itself, because it's made from different families. And there's tiny little animals on it, basically. They don't want to say that this thing is 500 million years old. Now, according to a doctor of mathematical science and physical science, the map was probably created at a time when the Earth's magnetic pole, situated in today's area of the Franz Joseph Land, which was exactly 120 million years ago. Now, the map we have is beyond any traditional perception of mankind, and we need a long time to get used to it. The map contains civil engineering works. It's that detailed. a system of canals with a length of about 12,000 kilometers, wires, powerful dams. Now, not far from the canals, a diamond-shaped grounds are shown, whose destination is unknown. The map also contains several inscriptions. Now, at first, the scientists thought it was ancient Chinese, though it turned out that the inscriptions were done in more of a hieroglyphic, symbolic style, and it is completely unknown. Now, despite their best efforts, science has never managed to decipher these inscriptions. Now, due to the professor's reluctance to credit any kind of ancient astronaut for creation of the map, and I still have no problem with, no, it was us. Well, something like us. Of course, not exactly us. But it is baffling. And scientists speculated that there could be as many as 348 similar fragments still undiscovered in that region. If they could find them all and piece together, the map would be approximately 340 meters in size. So it's pretty interesting stuff, and I know that the pictures that they have of this are, well, it's almost impossible to get much out of it, but interestingly enough, another map too, and it's our image for today, the Babylonian world map. Now, this cruciform ancient map of Babylon, or at least the Babylonian world, is, yes, an archaeological treasure equal to the Rosetta Stone and the Code of Hammurabi. It probably originates from southern Iraq. Babylonian world map, also known as Imago Mundi, it's just funny, it's Latin, is actually dated 6th century BC. One of the oldest world maps, most famous unless you count the last one that I just told you about. Now, the tablet contains cruciform inscriptions, again, a unique map of the Mesopotamian world. The inscription indicates that the copy of the previous map and locations featured on the map all indicate that the original could not have been created earlier than the 9th century BC. But it's pretty cool. And it's shown as Babylon in the center. There's a little triangle in the top half of the circle. Assyria, Elam, and other places are also named. Now, in the center area, there is a ring circular waterway labeled Salt Sea. The outer rim of the sea is surrounded by what were probably, or originally, 8 regions, each indicated with a triangle, labeled region or island, and marked in the distance. The cruciform text describes these regions, and it seems strange, and mythical beasts as well as great heroes live there. Though the text is far from complete, the regions are shown as triangles, since that was how they visualized what would look when you approach by water. Now, the map is sometimes taken as a serious example of ancient geography, but although the places are shown in their approximately correct positions, the real purpose of the map is to explain a Babylonian worldview and a mythical world. But unfortunately, scientists, as scientists do, have a tendency to see things just black or white. Now, there are something beautiful, of course, and there's a link to this on my page. Chamber of Stars that now holds the largest fossil hominid find in Africa. Again, South Africa. So if we want ancient, we got to go there. And as we know that the oldest man, well, the man with the oldest lineage on this planet was discovered 2012 in the United States, African heritage, similar region, as a matter of fact, and the oldest bones that we've ever found are there. Anyway, but his lineage is way beyond anything that we've found, at least by a couple million years. So I still don't have any problem with different species on this planet because one's just been found. Now, on which university today, September 10th, 2015, it was announced that the discovery of a brand new species of human relative, and they named it Homo naledi. And the most remarkable, sometimes shedding light on the origins and diversities of our genus, the family. He also appears to have intentionally deposited bodies of its death in a remote cave chamber, a behavior previously thought only limited to humans. It was a burial site. They found a burial site. But of course, still not giving much credit to all the beings that have been here, most likely previously, than us. Now, the fossils were revealed for the first time during an international launch of a conference in the Cradle of Humankind World Heritage Site, attended by people from South African government, participating researchers all over the world, as well as local and international media. It has much been anticipated, interesting, and this team of researchers and cavers and explorers announced in November 2013 that they had discovered something significant. In this cave that's called the Rising Star in the Cradle of Humankind, and it's about 50 kilometers northwest of Johannesburg. Now, they launched the Rising Star expedition, and have since discovered more than 1,550 numbered fossil elements. Now, the discovery is the single largest fossil humanoid find. Hominid. I'm thinking more humanoid, but it's okay. But anyway, it's the largest one, the oldest one, made in the continent of Africa. Now, the fossils, which have yet to be dated, lay in the chamber about 90 meters from that's about 100 yards from the cave entrance, accessible only through a chute, and it's so narrow that a special team of very slender individuals had to be found to go in there and retrieve them. I thought that was pretty cool. Now, so far, this team has recovered at least 15 individuals, all the same species, and a small fraction of fossils believed to remain in the chamber. Almost every bone in the body representing multiple times. So, H. naledi is already practically the best known fossil member of our lineage. I guess, perhaps most remarkably, the context of this find has led researchers to conclude that this somewhat primitive-looking hominid may have practiced a form of behavior previously thought only unique to humans. But apparently we're not looking at every other frickin' animal on this planet. But I'm going to let that go. They're scientists, so they are quackademics, and they haven't used their brains yet. Anyway, the fossils consist of infants, children, adults, elderly individuals found in a room deep underground that the team has called the Chamber of Stars. I thought that was really beautiful. Or Dina Ledy Chamber. The room has always been isolated from all the other chambers in this spot and never before opened directly to the surface. What's important for people to understand is that the remains were found practically alone in this remote chamber in the absence of any other major fossil mammals or animals. So remote was the space that more than 1,500 around fossil elements were discovered. Only about a dozen were not hominid, and a few pieces isolated were mouse and bird remains. So, scurried in or flew in. But it means that the chamber attracted very few accidental visitors. Such a situation unprecedented in the fossil hominid record, that the team notes that bones bear no marks of scavengers or carnivores or any other sign that non-hominid agents or natural processes such as moving water carried these individuals into the chamber. So they explored every scenario, including a mass death, an unknown carnivore, water transport from another location, an accidental death in a death trap, amongst others. But this must be a burial. And the animals, at least some of them, must have been pets, which is pretty darn cool. If there's a lot of animals in there, and this place had, if it was full of mice or all kinds of carnivores, which, they're hungry, they're going to be going after bones. But it was not the case. So I thought that was pretty cool. And where they found it, again, pretty cool. Interesting question, and thank you very much for the question. So if you do get a chance, turtleislandnews.info, go on the left-hand side of the page and you can send me questions and I will look them up. So I was asked, and it's kind of going off topic here, but we don't have a topic. We're going to be all over the place today. What do I think about melatonin, the pineal gland, in the Bible? Well, one of you guys are definitely very, very interesting. So here's what I got. Melatonin, as you probably already know, is secreted from the pineal gland. That encourages our consciousness to either enter a sleeping state or a meta state. Melatonin is from the same chemical family as melatonin. It's produced by the same gland. It also affects the consciousness, but of course, a more of a pronounced way. Melatonin messenger does not suppress the waking self-conscious in the same way as melatonin does during sleep. Instead, it modifies the borders of consciousness. It temporarily reprograms our brain circuitry in a unique way, allowing self-consciousness to separate from the body consciousness while remaining aware. Now, the main psychoactive ingredient in Melatonin is a chemical known as DMT. DMT, spirit molecule, because it gives you access to the spirit world. And it often induces religious experience. DMT is the best way there is to access other dimensions without having to build something and risk your life. There is no need to take DMT as a psychedelic drug. You can find this place through detoxification of the calcified gland through meditation. And for those that argue that this is not the connection to the spirit world, I leave you with this. Genesis. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is now preserved. Now it gets rather interesting at this point. If you notice, the head of the spinal cord, your brain stem, and its location to the pineal gland, which we've talked about before. Another interesting quote. Now this is the Gospel of Thomas, who didn't make it in there. Jesus saw the babies nursing, and he said to his disciples, "These nursing babies are like those who enter the Father's kingdom." They said to him, Shall we enter the Father's kingdom as babies? Jesus said to them, when you make the two into one, when you make the inner like the outer, and the outer like the inner, and the upper like the lower, when you make the male and the female into one, so that the male will not be male, nor the female be female. When you make eyes in the place of an eye, a hand in the place of a hand, a foot in the place of a foot, an image in the place of an image, then you will enter the kingdom. Yeah, I'm seeing why that didn't make it in there. Now, when a mother breastfeeds, not only is her pineal gland activated, sending out chemicals throughout the body, oxytocin and DMT. Breast milk is full of DMT. It puts the mother and the child into a state. It also puts the father into a state if he's in the room, makes him produce oxytocin. We enter the kingdom together. So we enter by breast milk. You do not need drugs for this. You need love. I know, it's scary, right? Interesting question, and I thought I didn't see anything in the Bible about pineal gland, but yeah, I guess they slipped that in there. And with the Bible, the Gospel of Thomas, really interesting stuff. We'll have to take a day and play with that book, because it's fairly cool. A lot of my favorite stuff didn't make it in the Bible, and I'm realizing why they didn't make the cut. Now, the World Trade Center, Twin Towers, when they were built, they cost around $400 million. 2014, that was equivalent to $2,300,000,000. If you were going to spend that kind of money, I bet you're going to be able to pick exactly how tall your buildings are. Now we have one of the towers, 1368 feet. The second, we had 62 feet. And these numbers, of course, are not random here. United States of America, in English gematria, equals 1368. That's one of the towers. One world order, in Jewish gematria, equals 1368. Same number. George W. Bush, Jewish gematria, 1362. That's the other tower. Illuminati bloodlines, in English gematria, equals 1362. Second tower. I just thought, a little bit of random fact there for you. It's always interesting to me when these numbers just keep coming up. Another Pope. Again. Pope Francis and the empty sarcophagus at the Vatican. Did you know that the Vatican in Rome, there is a courtyard that has in its centerpiece a giant pine cone? This is the pineal gland. This is the kingdom of heaven. This is where you go to find God. With me? Okay. Oh, I know you guys are my fellow nerds. I love you guys. So, some say the pine cone is symbolic of the human pineal gland, which I just said. The doorway to the afterlife. The door, the gate of heaven, heaven's gate, lots of names. An outer body experience as well. Now, on either side of this pine cone are two peacocks. Peacocks are the guardians of the sacred doorways. It's usually a bird or a griffin, so bird and something else, or two dogs, or not our two dog, but two dogs or two lions. It's all about the chamber again. We were talking Tuesday about you must hold the reins of these two dogs. It's the same thing. Again, the guardians of the sacred doorway, guardians of the gate. Now, this is a serious popery going on here. And I wonder if Pope Francis ever laid in the sarcophagus and meditated, because it's sitting there to bug me, probably, personally. Now, Pope Peter, aka the false prophet, the 112th, in his position, as prophesied, is the last. Who is the first? Roman Catholic Church sees Peter as the first pope. So who is Jorge Mario Bergoglio? Who is this guy? First Jesuit Pope? Maybe. The prophecy of St. Malachi contains 5 elements. That there will be a final Pope. During his reign, the Roman Catholic Church will be judged. During his papacy, Rome, the city of the 7 hills, will be utterly destroyed. The last Pope will be the 112th Pope from 1139 AD. His true identity is Peter the Roman. So the Jesuits, esoteric Freemasons, Illuminati, so what do you think? Our brothers to the south of us, America, $17 trillion in debt. Is America doomed? Are you guys doomed? Will there be a great American hero or an American Christ? Interestingly enough, Donald J. Trump, because he just threw that in there, the American Christ, these numbers, 322. 322 is the number of resurrection. 322 is the number that carries you from death to life. Oddly, Donald J. Trump, 888 in gematria, Jesus is 888 in Greek gematria. Will he save you? Ah, I don't think so. I really don't. Now, for the more irony that's going on here, that I mentioned yesterday, a 3-year-old boy, Elan Kurdi. I could spend an entire show just on that name alone, but has raised the awareness, apparently, of the world. Kind of. Not much. He and his family fleeing ISIS, and also not exactly. And war-torn Syria. Syria, ISIS, United States. This has been found over and over again, and there's more articles if you go to my page. Now, Elan drowned trying to reach the Greek island of Kos. Greek island of Kos is the birthplace of the goddess Leto. Leto is one of the female titans, a bride of Zeus, the mother of the twin gods, Apollo and Diana. She was the goddess of motherhood, protectress of the young. The irony here is the Syrian boy drowned fleeing for his life, we are told, that he and his family tried to reach the island of Kos, birthplace of Leto, goddess of motherhood, protectress of children. Now Elan Kurdi, 116. These are the numbers. Flip it upside down, you got 911. Apollo and Diana, 119. Flip that around, 911. As an aside, the word Kurd means to inspire horror. Are you afraid? It boggles the mind, really. It does. If the United States is currently $17 trillion in debt, how are we providing almost $3 billion in relief to help Syrian refugees? Are you borrowing money to give it away? How does that work? How does that work exactly? I don't know. I really don't. And if you ever asked yourself this obvious question, why didn't they rebuild those 2 towers? Should have happened. Didn't. Understand the reasons why, and you will hold the keys to the one world order. 100%. Because as I was saying yesterday, United States was never meant to go past this year. 100%. Now, according to the book of Joshua, the battle of Jericho was the first battle of the Israelites in their conquest for Canaan. Trumpets, towers, assault on Trump Tower that happened. Was it last week? Tycoons, security guards fighting Mexican immigrants. Make America racist again. The things that are going on right in our faces right now, and the rise of the machines. It's funny, a question was asked, will they bring on World War III? I think World War III has already started, myself. If you think World War II ended, this would be 3. I don't really think any war has ended. That this has been pretty much constant assault on humanity since World War II. And it all was led up to, of course, from World War I, when we actually had some brains left and decided to stand down. Now, technology. Do a Google search, or any kind of search engine, whatever you like, for armed drone, and you'll see General Atomics Reapers, that's her name, outfitted with Hellfire missiles. Reapers with Hellfire missiles, perhaps soaring over the sandy plains of Iraq, Syria, anywhere in Africa. In the future, the phrase may come to mean something completely different. The next frontier for drone technology, and particularly autonomy, is on and under the seas. Already, the United States and other militaries are doing research into ways armed robots can do much of the work that is performed by manned warships and submarines, especially in difficult environments like the Arctic. But a new white paper from the United Nations Institute for Disarmament Research, released last month, warns that ever smarter naval robots will make for very choppy waters in places like the United States and Russia and other nations. They have a growing presence, competing interests. Experts have successfully, or at least suggested, that fully autonomous weapon systems are likely to appear in a relatively uncluttered marine environment, which means they already have them and they're already out there bumping around by themselves. While a small group of experts are actively considering the legal and ethical issues raised by the maritime autonomy, the policymakers have directed little attention to specific issues, challenges that arise in this context. And while Elon Musk and others debate the logic of more autonomous aerial drones, the U.S. Navy has long used autonomous weapons on its ships. The need for a sea system that could shoot on its own was evident to military leaders far back in the 50s, when advances in electronics and missile propulsion raised the prospect of highly accurate anti-ship weapons that could strike faster than any human reflex could defend or human conscience could stop altogether. We're already way past that. So, we're going to have to look at this a little closer. How many ships are actually manned? Think about it. Humans are problematic. Robots aren't. Now, in the 80s, U.S. Navy ships began to install the Phalanx close-in weapon system, and that is PHALANX, close-in systems, weapons systems, a radar-detected Gatling gun with an autonomous mode. Click of a button. Boyfriend goes live. 2004, the Navy deployed a system called Aegis ballistic missile defense, capable of automatically finding and firing upon incoming ballistic missiles across an entire region, while the missiles were streaking towards a destroyer at 1,000 or more miles an hour. Who has time for human reflexes now? Other naval forays into autonomy include the Mk-60 Captor submerged torpedo launcher, which can listen for enemy submarines while waiting until specific sub happens by and pull the trigger automatically. Designers also engineered a growing array of undersea robots for surveillance, mine hunting. 2003, the U.S. became the first nation to deploy the autonomous robot to look for submerged mines, so they say, but it happened to be near Iraq's port of Gazar. Now, many of the world's conflict flashpoints on coastal or contested waters. We've always lived close to the ocean or the sea. Now, with rising seas, changing weather patterns, other consequences of what's going on here. Access to previously impassable areas are rendering maritime environment an increasingly strategic battle space for this ever-growing number. Case in point, Obama visited Alaska last week to highlight the Arctic region's growing economic importance, discuss the impacts of climate change, a warmer Arctic, as was planned from the beginning, at least 150 years ago. It has less ice coverage, of course, during the summer, allowing more shipping, more fishing, especially oil development, which perpetuates the burning of fossil fuels, which causes the Arctic to rise and get warmer. Wash, rinse, repeat. Russia, which claims most of the oil rights under the Arctic Circle, has taken to Belarus kind of assertions of its dominance in the region right now, like planting a flag at the North Pole. Meanwhile, the Arctic states are getting itchy under the parkas, as Obama was helping a salmon to spawn, apparently. 5 Chinese warships were sailing nearby in the Bering Sea. Meanwhile, Russia's foreign minister set a claim to the UN for 1.2 million square kilometers of Arctic sea shelf, citing ample scientific data collected in years of Arctic research. In other words, the ability to access Arctic, to explore it, to exploit it, and document the processes is all part of making legal claims to it. Autonomous underwater systems will, and most likely already do, play a role in all of these processes. 2014, Denmark appealed to the United States for 900,000 kilometers of Arctic seabed, a claim that conflicts with rival assertions by Canada and Russia, and they've completely forgot that there's people that live up there, that if anybody is entitled to this region, it's them, and you're screwing with it, and they're having problems because of it. Now, same year, Canada began to test its military drones. Where? In the Arctic. Last year. The project team deployed vehicles into situations that might be dangerous or difficult for the Canadian Armed Forces responder units. Remote locations to support search and rescue, hazardous material operations. Now, the mission's lead scientist told Newsweek, United Nations report makes no clear recommendations for fixing the increased autonomy in naval weapons, except to ask, do increasingly autonomous technologies in the maritime environment require development of fundamental new set of categories, concepts, rules? The answer, I would say yes. And probably add expletives like damn it and you friggin' a-holes, things like that. But as with the climate friggin' destruction that's going on right now, new rules may not be enough. And it may already be far, far, far too late with the fight for the holy land. War expanding in Yemen. Greek island of Lesbos, interestingly enough, on the verge of almost explosion with more than 15,000 asylum seekers, and our complete, utter biome failure going on now, and it's stunning. Rapid, complete die-off of animals near nuclear sites. 150,000 more if you count the 20,000 that died in, I think it was February. I'm going to have to look that up. Antelopes bleeding from internal organs. Pits brimming with corpses now. Experts baffled. Me, not so much. But it is unheard of. 100% mortality. I don't know any example in history like this. Now, NBC News, September 3rd. Now that the researchers have found clues as to why more than half of the antelope herd died rapidly, bacteria clearly played a role in their demise. But exactly how these normally harmless microbes suddenly changed with such a death toll, they're saying, is a mystery. The extent of this die-off, the speed of this die-off, killing a whole calving herd, killing all the animals. This has not been seen in any other species. It's unheard of. And the tissue samples revealed that toxins caused extensive bleeding in most of the animals' organs. But the name of this one, Pasteurella, is found pretty normally. Usually doesn't cause anything harmless unless the animals already have a weakened immune system. As I've told you, we all have a weakened immune system. Now, September 2nd, in 4 days, an entire herd, 60,000 sagas, had died off. Workers struggled to keep up with the mass dying. Quickly buried the animals, died in heaps, scientists unknown, bleeding from internal organs out of their eyes. Never seen so many. Now, all told, again, since 2014, 150,000 of these things, at least. Now, if you go back to May 22nd, there's an article on our page, and the numbers and the images that describe the mass dying of this critically endangered species. Now, the enormous saga die-off is particularly devastating because there's been previous die-offs: 1955, 1956, 1958, 1967, 1969, 1974, 1981, 1988. It's very dramatic. 100% mortality. Unknown environmental trigger. Now again, it is not unknown. We know what's doing it. We absolutely know. So again, not to freak out, but you need to be bucking up your immune system because we are fighting for our lives right now. Because animals are delirious and disoriented, all up and down the west coast of Turtle Island. All of it, from the very north to the very south. Unprecedented. Something is not right. And the waters offshore are so lacking in things like anchovies and sardines and fish, squid, bugs, animals. We've talked about this, all kinds of dead fish, all kinds of dead things, a bunch of birds dead in the waters, fish dying, and things acting as if, like sea lions and seals and otters acting like they're having seizures and acting delirious, like dementia. Now, common die-offs are reported all along the Alaskan Peninsula, but these unusual numbers in nearshore birds, in areas many appearing weak and approachable now. You can go up to them. They don't know what the bird mortalities are at this point, if it's related to what is killing the whales. Now, in addition to the whales, Alaska's seen dead walruses, a lot of dead, a lot of disorientated birds. Moose acting weird. One moose found dead in the lake. One swimming in circles, struggling. They don't know why this moose was in distress, what sickness it may have happened. But if you've listened to my Jumping Jack Flash report, you won't be that surprised. Now, we know for a fact that they should be prepared for this, because the U.S. nuclear accident in 1965 was staged. Every document shows this. The Atomic Energy Commission staged a nuclear rocket accident in the Nevada desert in 1965 that sent radioactive cloud more than 200 miles to Los Angeles. In a document I have on the page, it was discovered from the Energy Department as part of a continuing inquiry to the government's secretive human radiation experiments that January 12th, 1965, in Jackass Flats, Nevada, interesting name, part of the rocket's nuclear core was intentionally vaporized so that scientists could study the behavior of the reactor, environmental effects of radiation. Considerably more people were exposed than in any other experiment because the cloud traveled so far. The cloud was tracked by an aircraft, and increasing radioactivity was observed in Barstow, San Bernardino, Los Angeles, San Diego. United States Department of Energy said in 1995 that human radiation experiments are ongoing. The Kiwi transition nuclear test involved a controlled nuclear excursion, that's what they're calling it, resulting in a partially vaporized radioactive core. This created a plume that, while low in radioactivity detectable, they knew what was going to happen to us. They knew 100%. Anyway.
Slippery slope, Lord, and I'm sliding. The love just ain't no good. Walking around ain't no good. Ain't no good. I'm walking around. I love that girl, and it stung like a bee. How I love that girl, and it's gone around, walking around, yeah, walking around. Sinner standing at the gates of heaven, knocking on the door, please let me in, Lord. Well, I knocked on the window, I knocked on the door. Oh, Lord, Lord, can you take my soul? I know, cause you're full of sin, and I've got the key and you can't get in. Oh, Lord, just a little bit longer. Oh, Lord, just a little bit longer. Oh, Lord, just a little bit longer. A little bit longer till the judgment day. Please, Gabriel, tell the Lord I'm here. Devil got me by the coat talking in my ear. He said you can't get to heaven unless you repent. I said thank you, Satan, that's the best news yet. Oh, Lord, and just a little bit longer. Oh, Lord, just a little bit longer. Oh, Lord, just a little bit longer. Just a little bit longer to the judgment day.
Welcome back, everyone. Did you get your tea? I got my tea. God, my throat hurts. So, here we are. Absolutely screwed. I can't look at it any other way. And the situation update. Flash flood, Japan. At least 8 people are missing. Dozens of others remain stranded in this widespread flooding. Landslides in the northeast of Japan, which left more than 90,000 people evacuated from their homes. Really bad. Now, one of the rivers burst its banks Thursday due to typhoon-triggered torrential rain. Self-defense forces, police, helicopter teams have scrambled to rescue more than 100 people stranded inside their homes or on rooftops right now. Thousands of households with residential area are feared flooded in the insistent rains that followed. Multiple agencies confirmed that the emergency responders came out to General Electric Aviation, now this is in Ohio, for a possible chemical leak. Authorities first reported the emergency activities in the plant, number 1, Newman Way, 9 in the morning. Officials say almost nothing, possible leak, chemicals involved, but they're not talking about anything more than that. So hazmat situation, and they're flooding us with more chemicals. So I want to make sure that our brothers and sisters from the state of Ohio, United States, Evendale, which has been plagued with some problems in the last little while, were at least warned. Now Singapore. Singapore has offered to assist Indonesia's efforts to fight their ongoing forest fires, which is causing a haze now in Singapore and Malaysia, like what we have in Canada and United States. These flash floods and horrific weather changes are about to start rocking. Going to get worse. More and more earthquakes, especially around the Alaska region. I've had a couple 5.9s today. See, when I first saw it, they said 6 point something, but all around that coast, there's, look, what am I going to say? There's so much going on. Physically, there isn't a heck of a lot we can do about it. Because it's not... Okay, our planet has survived many cosmic energies. I don't think it's just the cosmic energies going on here. The inside of our planet is changing. I know that I put up an article about that, but it's changing the outside. This seems to be something really common all over the world. Well, not all over the world, but all over the cosmos. That something is happening to all the planets. Maybe this is part of the cycle. I don't know. I can't say what's causing it at this point. But, our governments aren't helping. Australia, for example, looks set and ready to go to start bombing Syria as liberals warn against too much compassion for the refugees in this mass migration. Yes, some of it's most likely staged, but we know the culprits. We do. We have a sandstorm going on, blanketing the Middle East, that is unprecedented. It looks apocalyptic, what's going on. In the United States, the Navy SEAL has already said World War III is on, so it's not just me thinking what's going on is a big frickin' deal. And yes, I said frick. See? I can go through a whole show without saying bad words. Because it's pretty obvious to me the governments are preparing for something massive right now. Now, a former U.S. Navy SEAL, an FBI agent, Jonathan Gilliam, agrees with me. So he rocks, obviously. And there's something a little sexy about a man who could kill you with a straw. Okay, moving on. He agrees with all of us who think World War III is already on. In this case, though, he's calling it an unconventional war that came about due to a lack of forward thinking by United States and the usual suspects, of course. Now, in a related report by the Inquisitor, Ukrainian president claims that Boris Nemtsov, I'm guessing, anyway, died before proving Vladimir Putin knowingly positioned Russian troops inside the Ukraine in order to fight alongside separatist forces. Now, a recent poll in Russia shows that a large percentage of Russian people believe it is the U.S. that gives Ukraine military aid. That's pretty much most of the world agrees with that part. Now again, King Abdullah II of Jordan said all nations need to be united in order to bring about Daesh, or ISIS, to bring them down. I've said this to leaders both in Islamic and Arab world. He says, the world in general, that this is a third world war by any means. But I'm seeing over and over again, we saw those guys with the gloves, right? And the nice little Nikes shoes on. And the relatively light skin for Middle Eastern people. So, we gotta look at the exact same thing we always look at here. This is United States. As it almost always is. And their buddies, of course. It's never just one thing. This mass migration. this crisis? What it is a crisis of imperialism. And that widely circulated photo of the 3-year-old Syrian boy is problematic at best. Now in Canada, the leaders of the Liberal and New Democratic parties have used the news of this young man's death, this boy, this child's tragic death, along with the deaths of his 5-year-old brother and his mother, because it's a Disney show, Mom Has to Die, to criticize HAARP government's response to the Syrian refugee crisis. Trudeau, who does not give even one shit about you, and McClare, but he is cute though, I realize the cuteness, have called on Canada to accept more Syrian refugees. There is no way they're going to do that. Maybe if they can find some light skin enough, they might let those ones in. We're not taking care of our people here, and we certainly are not going to be letting more brown people in this country. Not while this maniac's in charge. The real tragedy is the refusal of Western leaders to acknowledge the cause of the refugee crisis. It is imperialism. It is Western, genocidal, never-ending wars on people in the Middle East, in Central Asia, and in Africa. Period. There have been more refugees since World War II. The number of refugees increasingly marked since the start of this global war on terror, or terror, if you like, whenever the United States and its imperialist allies have intervened. Through direct military action, indirect proxy wars, economic sabotage, coups in the name of democracy and the war on terror, or the responsibility to protect, death and despair have been forced upon millions of innocent people who have been left no other choice than to abandon their native lands and embark on a dangerous future of desperate struggle. Excuse me, in Afghanistan, I need some more to drink. I'm just so dry. Do I sound like a frog today? I bet you I sound like a frog. Are you guys laughing at me? I'm laughing at myself. If I accidentally hear this recording, I know I sound really weird. Do I sound weird? Okay, I have tea. I have lemon. I have sage. I even burnt sage. I'm like, please, spirits of this planet, allow me to keep this voice going for at least half this show. Or I'll play music for you guys. Or I was going to have a guest on today. So talk about me scrambling. I found out 3 minutes before the show, no guest. I'm like, oh crap, what am I gonna do? Anyway, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, Yemen, Pakistan, Somalia, Mali, Korea, Vietnam, East Timor, Sudan, Ukraine. Pretty much everywhere, the livelihoods of millions have been destroyed by the forces of the U.S. and the Western colonist, imperialistic Darth Vader troops. In the 80s, Afghanistan had a really popular government. They were implementing widespread reforms. Labor unions were legalized. Minimum wage was established for the first time. Hundreds of thousands of Afghans were enrolled in educational facilities. Their girls, too. Women were freed from age-old tribal bondage, able to earn independent income. The U.S. and Western imperialists, fearful of that kind of darn thing going on, and the distribution of wealth supported feudal landlords, federalistic fundamentalist mullahs, to sow chaos across the country, bring the rise to elementals that further formed Al-Qaeda, Taliban, with same suspiciously pale skin. The Afghan people were once again dealt more severe punishment by the forces of Western imperialism since 9/11. At first, your troops were welcome there. That didn't last long. Now, despite a lack of conclusive evidence, but any guy from a cave, 30 years of intervention, or help, we're calling it help now, help, and intervention in Afghanistan have left these people impoverished, traumatized, desperate. The conflicts in Libya, Syria, eerily similar to all Western destabilization. 2011, the Arab Spring protests swept across Middle East, North Africa. Western imperialism hijacked legitimate grievances of the masses as a pretext for more intervention in the name of responsibility to protect and democracy to promote. Prior to 2011, United States NATO intervention, Libya was among the wealthiest, the most stable countries in all of Africa. It was. With the entire continent, you see how big Africa is? The entire continent's highest standard of living. Housing was enshrined as a human right. Everyone had a house. Everyone had education. Healthcare services were free to all citizens. The country was pushing to establish an African currency linked to gold to help end the countless cycle of debt, impoverishment of African masses by same Western guys. Under the cloak of United Nations, using a pretext of protecting the people of Libya from Gaddafi's murderous rule, launched airstrikes on Libya and allied themselves to Al-Qaeda and infiltrated Al-Qaeda in the Islamic and other Libyan extremist groups. NATO airstrikes killed hundreds, if not thousands, of citizens, forced Libya back into the Stone Age. You bombed them back to the Stone Age 4 years ago. Gaddafi was mercilessly tortured and murdered by the rebels. Thousands have been killed as rival tribal extremist factors, now allied with ISIS, so Dala, battling for control of that country. Syria is Libya 2.0. U.S. imperialism, with the support of Israel, Turkey, Persian Gulf states, trained, financed, moderate, and I'm making the little quotey symbols with my fingers, moderate, rebels to overthrow the secular and popularly supported government of al-Assad, the Free Syrian Army, i.e., the moderate, finger symbols, have been virtually eliminated in the conflict despite millions of dollars in aid from the U.S. and its regional allies. FSA fighters have deserted the ranks of ISIS en masse, itself a project of the illegal U.S. occupation of Iraq that killed at least 1 million Iraqis, with more suffering from the chemical attacks, so dying slowly. There's overwhelming evidence here that the U.S., its allies, have been actively training, actively supporting ISIS since the start of this proxy war in Syria. It wasn't until ISIS invaded Iraq with its new Toyota technologies, courtesy of the US, 100% proven, that ISIS was even declared a threat. But now it apparently is a threat to the world. Western imperialism changed its tactics from supporting ISIS to airstrikes on Iraq again and Syria again, with the support of other Western places, Turkey, which is also conveniently bombing anti-ISIS Kurdish fighters right now. Saudi Arabia and the Persian Gulf states, without consultation with the Syrian government, Iran, or Hezbollah, have been fighting ISIS and Al-Qaeda elements since the start of this conflict. Hundreds of thousands have died in the West proxy war against the Syrian government, from Libya to Afghanistan, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Pakistan, Somalia, United States, and the imperialists. The interventions, the coups, and sanctions have displaced and killed millions and millions of people. Slaughtered. Physicians for Social Responsibility estimates that in Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan alone, the deaths of 1.3 million people. It is no wonder then that hundreds of thousands seek asylum elsewhere. However, traveling huge distances overland, on water, refugees find themselves abused, discriminated against, held in detention, rejected from Europe, Canada, United States, Australia. More than 2,500 people have died in the last 2 months trying to cross the Mediterranean Sea into Europe, while the International Organization for Migration estimates 30,000 people will most likely be dead at the end of this year trying this passage. Refugees attempting to enter Europe, even if they are granted asylum in a mainland European country such as Germany, will be met with police violence in Greece, in Italy, in other countries on the Mediterranean, the first landing points for boats sailing from North Africa, from Turkey. Greek riot police have beaten refugees to death, protesting the failure of local governments to process their applications. Conditions are so poor for refugees that while waiting for processing, newborn babies have died by the hundreds. On the Macedonian-Greek border, more than 1,000 refugees crossing daily. Refugees that broke the barbed wire fences were shot in the face and hit with stun grenades. Macedonian police have treated these people as rioters. Italian police forcibly removed African refugees camping out at the French border after France refused to grant them asylum. Hungary is building a fortified wall, similar to the barbaric wall that divides the U.S.-Mexican border, to stop people who are desperate. Yeah, there's a lot of them that are violent who made that situation happen. Thousands of refugees seeking asylum in Australia are being detained in detention facilities in Papua New Guinea that is being raped right now. By who? Who's raping that place? Because you want their stuff. Again. In the small island of Nauru, which is really cute, but it's now being dubbed as the Guantanamo Bay of the Pacific. Refugees can be detained for several years at these facilities. Social workers have observed what they are calling profound damage. Prolonged deprivation, abuse of power, confinement, extremely harsh environments, uncertainty of the future, disempowerment, loss of privacy, autonomy, inadequate health, inadequate protection. An Australian Senate investigation received reports of guards raping women on tape, sexually exploiting children as young as 2 years old. Just as Britain refuses to assist drowning refugees in the Mediterranean out of fear that it will become, it might encourage migrants to seek asylum. Unannounced policy of Australian authorities is to make refugees suffer so much abuse and inhumane living conditions to deter them from seeking asylum in Australia. If Australia imperialism hasn't inflicted enough suffering on people in the Middle East, in the South, Southeast Asia, U.S. and Western imperialism is the root of the cause of the refugee crisis, period. Every man, woman, child that is killed by U.S. drone strikes in Pakistan, U.S. Western-backed militias in Afghanistan, Somalia, Syria, European and North American mining, mostly Canada. Our government is the biggest abuser of people, and I'm not sorry, but you know what I mean. Our government owns these things. The oil conglomerates in Central and Western Africa are starved to death in Yemen by the U.S.-backed Arab bloc of that country. Until the genocidal aims of the U.S. imperialists, the support of Canada, the support of Australia, the European Union, the regional allies are defeated, the war on terror will continue to make life unbearable for working people all over this planet. And as soon as they're done with their soldiers, we know this in the States, as soon as they're done with you, you're discarded. They're over you. Absolutely over you. And will let you die, Because does the VA actually hate you? I think so. Our boys and girls who are fighting so hard, apparently, for us, our freedom. Although you'd think if you're going to fight for our freedom, it'd be in our country because someone was trying to bother us. Actually, someone is trying to bother us, and they're right here in our countries. Here's what you get when you trust the government to do much of anything. Department of Veteran Affairs. A new report that documented previously unimaginable levels of non-feasance. In a previously unexamined agency, the Health Eligibility Center. Such a massive bureaucracy that tries and fails, to determine whether individual veterans are eligible for medical care, using rules written by Congress and by VA bureaucrats. I went through this for my husband, who's passed away, fought in Vietnam. Oh my God, do not ask these people for money. I know a lot of people have to, but oh my God. I almost got a nosebleed filling out the forms and talking to them on the phone. Oh, well, you guys probably know veterans. I have never seen so close parking at a VA hospital, but I didn't realize how many people are actually in some sort of service over there, or have been. But anyway, now that is a complex and arcane system of rules, but it's nothing that a second year computer science student can't knock out in a variety of programming languages for 2 cans of Monster and half a bag of Cheetos. The VA, with its exploding budget, couldn't answer these questions. Number 1, did the HEC have a backlog of 889,000 healthcare applications in a pending status right now? Did 47,000 veterans die while their health care applications were in the pending process status? Were 10,000 veterans' health records purged, deleted by the HEC? Were 40,000 unprocessed applications spanning a 3-year time period discovered January 2013? There are some answers. These answers are relatively horrific. Number 1, technically, no. They didn't have a backlog of 889,000 applications. It was more like 867,000. However, a lot of that is due to the fact they just never followed up on the applications, ever. No, 47,000 vets didn't die while they were on the pending list. That was not true. Actually, the real number is 307,000 vets died. In fact, over a third, 35% of veterans' applications showed up on Social Security Death Index. The individual cases haven't been examined, of course, to see if an application are actual frauds using stolen identities. Number 3, this allegation is basically true. At a minimum, they couldn't tell what was actually deleted because the VA's massive IT operation, led by an appointed Assistant Secretary for Information and Technology, and disposing of billions with minimal oversight, by the by, were so monumentally substandard. They suck on a great big. I post that picture of this? There's this fish in the deep ocean, and it just has this great big mouth and a tiny little body. That's what I'm thinking. It sucks like that fish. Number 4, this was fundamentally true. And I'm like, what? What do you mean? That's true. As there were a total of 39,000 unprocessed, neglected records, but only 11,000 of them were initial new records. 28,000 were record updates. However, these were only the applications from a 4-month period. That's not all the applications. 4 months. So, fighting for your country? Don't do it. And as for wrongdoing, so bad. Because while this new outrage is the latest to hit the veteran community, numbed only by the hemi, semi, demi, quaver, drumbeat of the VA failure stories. It's certainly not only the VA news this week. Another report was snuck out on a Friday by a Government Accountability Office, an oxymoron if there ever was one, noting that, number one, the VA is experiencing a growing trend of adverse outcomes. Their words. Number two, the methodology the .gov requires be done for each of these cases is called a root cause analysis, RCA. And number three, despite more occasions for the required RCA, the VA is doing fewer RCAs currently, which my nose may be bleeding. Is my nose bleeding? Number four, the VA culture has changed in recent years. Oh good, it's changed. And made staff uncomfortable reporting errors. Oh my God, they're uncomfortable. Can we get some tea? A pillow? Massage? So the increased error rate is probably even higher when understatement due to intimidation is considered. Now, it has been noted that the report meant the VA had been producing both more error records, medical errors, and less interest in examining those errors. Hospitals across the country are under growing pressure to reduce preventable medical mistakes. And we remember this is on human beings, right? The errors that could cause real harm, even death, to patients, so people. But the Department of Veterans Affairs, which runs a massive system of hospitals, clinics that cared for 5.8 million veterans last year, is doing less, not more, to identify what went wrong, to make sure it doesn't happen again. So let's talk about what adverse event means. Because I was wondering, what do you mean, adverse events? And we're still talking about people. An adverse event is an incident that causes injury to a patient as a result of an intervention that shouldn't have been made, or that failed to happen, rather than the patient's underlying medical condition. Here's some examples. Medical equipment was improperly sterilized, leading to a patient or multiple patients to be exposed to an infectious disease. Surgery was done on the wrong patient, with the wrong procedure, on the wrong side. A patient falls or is burnt horribly. Patient gets the wrong medication. Patient gets the wrong dose. It is these adverse events that the VA managers have actually lost interest in examining. Hey, they have trusts and stock portfolios to manage, dang it. Meanwhile, their house reporter will use a nice, soft, passive voice to remove their agency from their actions in abusing and injuring and killing the veterans who apparently are fighting for your freedom. Unacceptable. Do you not think? And that should be unacceptable to anyone who claims to actually care about this sacred responsibility we, the people, have to care for those who have gone to battle. Mostly because they're poor. Sometimes because they think they've done the right thing. But mostly because they're poor. Now, he said that and then got back on his jet to DC. This VA boss. Because that's the only way to care for those who have spent 180 days in uniform. VA's real threshold of eligibility for many benefits is to build a gigantic, top-down, centrally planned Soviet-style hospital system with lots and lots and lots and lots of jobs for middle managers. And as far as McDonald's claimed that the VA is failing because it's been starved for resources, a staffer of the House Speaker, John Boehner, posted the following. During the Obama administration, the VA has had its largest budget increase ever by percentage of any cabinet department. It is at record levels. On top of that, Congress passed an additional $16 billion in emergency funding last year, 2014. And this year, in addition to passing a bill that would increase the VA spending another $4.6 billion, we gave the agency an additional $3 billion in what they're calling funding flexibility. So is the problem money? Or as the speaker's guys point out, the VA's cultural imperative to do less rather than more, and is someone taking this money? And yes, remember the Washington Post article describing an internal memo that showed $6 billion, yes, that's with a B, blown outside of the normal federal contracting rules. Almost $1,000 for every veteran under VA care. Maybe you don't remember that. I bet you the speaker does. Someone's taking your money. Let's stop letting people fight. What do you say? Now, yesterday, as the Earth moves in a region of the galaxy that leads to increased cosmic energies, affecting our sun, altering our DNA, it's predicted that this will lead to changes in society, including major discoveries of ancient technologies, the secret space program, extraterrestrial life. A famous doctor in bioelectromechanics argues that Earth and humankind will make a leap in evolution with the episode of solar eruptions that happened actually yesterday. This thing called the X-wave, that is the ribbon, that's what it is, hitting us. Now, the exercise Jade Helm, which began on July 15th and runs until September 15th, is the true purpose of obtaining information on the effects of this energetic change, received in order to better manage the chances that it triggers us getting together as a family again. And then the Time Lords have stepped in, and I'm gonna need more time, because they're probably messing with me too. Bastards. So there have been a couple times, at least, in a short period of time, that we almost made it through this. The 60s, where people all over the world forgot their nasty little skin color differences. And we started to work together as a family, without fear. Together, to take care of each other, to protect each other. This is how they're using us. This is a social experiment, and we will go into the aliens again, and we'll keep going. But this exercise is very much linked to this energetic change that happens every year at this time. This change in frequency, the energetic changes, the red sprites. The red sprites raise the frequency of the planet and you. It affects your DNA. What's happening inside the planet is affecting your DNA. These two events inside the planet and the one just in our upper atmosphere is what's changing us. Change of frequency, in which small changes but it's also making small states in which these exercises are performed. They will face a higher frequency, as we've already noticed in July and August. Is why there's so many events going on almost daily in the areas that Jade Helm is on. There's a reason for that. Now the aim, the beginning, has always been to learn, to manage, to see what affects the population, especially as the larger states. What will happen in September? When this is done, what will happen worldwide in September? This has been testing all of us. Intelligence community of the United States is well aware of the effects of this energy. They are taking steps to manage it. I believe the United States Special Services are not the only entities in this world. Consciousness of incoming cosmic energies, consciousness of the planet herself, they are taking steps to manage it. Now September 21 to 28 range is very significant, because this will coincide with that Baha'i thing that I told you about Tuesday. It will coincide with meeting between the cross-dressing Pope Francis, United States President Barack Obama, also former cross-dresser, at the White House. Now that's September 23, following the Pope to address the U.S. Congress, September 24. It's an attempt also to use the Geneva CERN and the European Council for Nuclear Research to divert a massive energy wave that's incoming. Now, after visiting Washington, Pope Francis will address the world's political leaders at the UN General Assembly September 25th. And I have put Tuesday's archive up. I would say suggest anyway you listen to that, because it has a much more detailed breakdown of what's going on this September. Now, the Vatican Information Service is well aware of this. It's why they've been looking through Lucifer into the sky. That's an entirely different thing. They're not looking for the wave. The wave, you can't see it. They're looking for another planet thing. It's invisible, so it's going to be hard to see, but it's already here. We'll get to that. Now, it's more than a coincidence that the strongest religions, the political leaders of the world, meet when these energies invade the planet. That's why it happens in September. Now, the incoming of these energies have a profound effect on you. The outgassing of these energies from the planet will trigger major discoveries. Something's out there. Close. It's why they keep blanking out the sky. Something's there. Now, the secret space program, this extraterrestrial life, specialists in advanced technologies, empathic people, intuitively described events coming. There were huge sized spheres leaving our solar system. I don't know, have they fulfilled their purpose? We saw them on that space site, the space zoo that I go to, leaving, just as we saw them coming in. Now, September 28th at 11:11, we've been told there will be a bombardment. Gamma photon light particles traveling at light speed, producing an instantaneous change in DNA. What's coming in will change our planet as we know it. But what we know for a fact, what we can actually prove, is that the human resonance is increasing. It always increases when there's sprite activity. Now, September 9th, yesterday, was known as the Event Horizon. Most important day in human history, many have said, stating this is not an end but a beginning, perhaps even an ascension, a mass wave. But it begins with a vibration that passes through your body. You probably felt tingling in your feet. How did you feel yesterday? What did you feel? Were you different? Did you sound different? Did you do anything different? Are you incredibly hungry today? And very, very thirsty? This is not just the GMOs. Food and wildlife being changed to an inhuman applications. We have entered the final stage of the days of Noah. Agricultural economists and scientists have spent a good portion of their professional career studying the effects of agriculture, specifically GMO crops. In a study in 2012, impacts of genetically engineered crops on the pesticide use. In the first 16 years, he displays the use of herbicides has increasingly dramatically since the inception of herbicide-tolerant varieties of corn and soy. This technology has led to a 527 million pound increase in herbicide use in the United States alone, just between 1996 and 2011. The U.S. Geological Survey are finding the exact same thing. I'd like to continue this, guys, if you don't mind, so come to the dark side. Join me, turtleislandnews.info, and I'm going to go into some overdrive today if you guys are into it. Thank you very much, Revolution Radio. Love you guys. Hugs and kisses. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for hanging out with me, and I hate ending in the middle of a hot topic. But there's a couple of things I need to let you know about today. And it's important enough, I think, that we continue. Now, instead of falling once again to the dozer blade, the High Frequency Active Aurora Research Program has a new life. Mid-August, U.S. Air Force General Tom Masello shook hands with the UAF's Brian Rogers and Bob McKay, transferring the powerful upper atmospheric research facility from military to university. You may have heard of HAARP. Now, Nick Begish wrote a book about it. Jesse Ventura tried to bully his way past the gate during a TV episode of Conspiracy Theory. Muse recorded an album called HAARP at Wembley Stadium from a stage filled with antennas meant to resemble those standing on a gravel pad off of Cutoff Road. Now, the science fiction assertions of caribou walking backwards, mind control, HAARP's ability to change the weather have made researchers wince. It's hard to describe a complicated instrument that sends invisible energy into a zone that no one can see. But HAARP is a group of high-frequency radio transmitters powered by 4 diesel tugboat generators from one from an old locomotive. The transmitters send a focused beam of radio wave energy into the aurora zone, where we get the nice bouncy lights. There, that energy can stimulate the speck of the electric sun-earth connection about 100 miles above our heads. Why did the university higher ups swing the door open for conspiracy theorists? Why not let HAARP go quietly back to the boreal forest, which the Cree are standing to fight for right now, by the way. Now, even though it's esoteric and hard to understand, it's the best. The head of the UAF's Geophysical Institute, which now has the key to the complex, located off mile 13.3 of Cutoff Road. The facility is the best tool to study the region above the earth as we know it, McCoy said. Of 3, yes, there's 3, of such ionospheric heaters in the world, one in Norway, one in Russia, soon to be one in Puerto Rico. Not yet, though. HAARP is the most powerful. It is the most agile of the 3. According to the people who have the one in Norway. Now, at an interview in his office, McCoy said meetings with the others in space physics community convinced them the HAARP was worth saving. During the 2013 workshop with potential users who study the shell of the ionized plasma that coats the planet from 40 to 600 miles above our heads, research said that they would use HAARP if the university took it over. With HAARP, it's possible to conduct controlled experiments versus simply waiting for the sun to perturb space to attempt to learn from studying its response. What's to be gained from perturbing space? Space is pretty big. Do we want to perturb it? Apparently we do. Anyway, the ionosphere carries satellite radio signals that are disturbed during solar storms. With heat, we can create a disturbance. We can watch how it dissipates. We can generate irregularities to test the effects on satellite to ground radio systems. We don't have to wait for Mother Nature to generate conditions. Oh goody, we don't have to wait. Because I was in a hurry to do all of this perturbing. So since it opened in 2003, with funding the late Ted Stevens helped secure, HAARP has hosted many scientific doings and applied research for the military. One such study that they're going to admit to was using the antenna array to heat part of the ionosphere. That in turn acted like a low-frequency antenna that could send ocean-penetrating signal to a submarine. That ping could tell a submarine captain to surface in order to receive a conventional radio communication. The military had specified objectives, and now we can do more basic science, apparently. It will help them. It will help us with general ionospheric, thermospheric modeling. So they're going to ask the heavens to strike a pose, basically. So, like, how do ions and neutrons couple in the upper atmosphere? I kid you not, that's what they said. So we're going to be watching porn up there. Porn's going on. Nice. Now HAARP is open now because it had been closed for a little while. They only use it certain times of year. But the transmitters have been cool since the spring of 2014. So people who's been telling you HAARP is doing stuff, they're like what I like to call wrong. Now with the transfer from the military to the university, Bristow and McCoy are looking for customers. Scientists funded to travel to Central Alaska on a 2-week campaign so they can fire the transmitters for 10 hours a day. There are no customers yet. It is not on, as far as I know. Now, McKay and Bristow are confident that they will be able to pay back a $2 billion or $1 million loan from the University of Alaska. That money is now keeping the lights on in HAARP and funding other costs of operation. The worst case scenario is that few or no researchers step forward. They are forced to sell HAARP instruments to recover the loan cost. Best case, scientists use it. A national entity sponsors the cost of HAARPing, as NASA does for the Institute's Poker Flat research range, who is interesting, and we'll talk about that one day. Note to self, talk about Poker Flat research range. It's pretty cool. And as we run it as a research facility independently, the clock is ticking anyway to repay the loan right now. They've got 3 years to find customers. They're sticking their necks out. It's the best in the world, and somebody spent $300 million to build the darn thing. Now, since the 70s, the University of Alaska Fairbanks Geological Institute has provided this column free cooperation of the UAF research station. Okay, so it's off, not working. The other two are, and there's one soon to be made in Puerto Rico. But why would they close down the newest one? Why are they talking about it now? Are the other ones working with Jade? Abso-friggin-lutely. Now, we've done the event horizon, yes? GMOs. Call it seed sovereignty or seed security. If people do not have access and ability to save, breed, replant seeds, they have no food security. Seed is the very basic of our food basis. Seed is important. That's why there are always seed pods in alien movies. War on Terra, again. Now, when genetically modified entities are created. They are also patented by companies that created them. In essence, these companies now own that specific life form. It becomes illegal to save, replant, crossbreed, conduct research on these patented seeds and crops. Now, another new and controversial genetic technology is gene editing. It's called CRISPR. This technique lets researchers alter genetic sequences quickly, flexibly, at will. One proposed use of CRISPR, I kid you not, is create gene drives, where a researcher creates genetic changes in an organism that are designed to more rapidly and deliberately speed through an entire population. In a few generations, much like a nuclear chain reaction, it is intended that an entire population or species that changes or can be wiped out entirely. Mutation on this level is irreversible. Now, inhuman differences happening right now. This is actual human genetic experimentation going on right now. And as I've told you before, this is not light. This is not a game. This is absolutely happening right now. This is part of the test. This is part of Jade, unfortunately. They are going to see how us, as new genetically modified organisms, are going to behave during these changes. These are about gene driving. Now, to quote an article in the International Business Times, natural selection would be turned on its head. Decisions made by researchers could end up permanently rewriting the entire genomes of entire wild populations. While many of these emerging technologies may hold potential for combating pests, disease, 2 eyes, having men, many of the world's woes, not the men, we do not have a good enough grasp on how this will affect humans and the environment in the long term. It is said that it takes at least a full human generation to understand the implications of any new technology. Existing GMO technology has been in commercial use for a very long time. They admit since the 90s, but my mom used to work at a research center in Canada. I'm telling you, since the 70s, easy. But they don't understand its ramifications, let alone any long-term effects on us, our biome. Which is another reason that we need to be very cautious to the 15th. Anything we hear, anything we say, especially to trigger an emotion, most likely has to do for that. But for the sake of our planet, the entire spectrum of inhabitants, I think it's time we stepped back and did some due diligence before we race to the next technology in turn. We have so much. We have so much here for us, as we all know, and I realize I preach into the choir right now. But you guys know this. There are changes they are doing to us. changes that are going to be irreversible. They don't know the effects. They're testing them. They're testing them right now on us. What they're doing to our children. What they're doing to us. And I think that it's already stepped up into, what do we even call this? We call this biome research. Would we? Irreversible changes affecting us. And of course they're testing us. I guess they want to see what this is going to do. I'm not sure yet, you know. I'm really not sure where this takes us next. But the top transhumanist website says those who do not support their vision, as in anyone with a freaking thought in their head, I would think, will be considered zombies, to be avoided and perhaps killed. Because this much is clear. If you're a transhumanist, ordinary people are zombies. Zombies are usually what is seen as either externally revived corpse or bodies in a state between life and death. Purgatory, if you will. In both cases, they remain on Earth beyond their will. So, how does one deal with a zombie? Especially when they are the majority of the population. There are, in general, 3 options? Because everything seems to be a zombie movie, doesn't it? 1, you kill them, right? You have to kill them. What is believed right now? Because it's not too early to discuss how these naysayers will be regarded, perhaps as a guide on how they will be dealt with. And it's pretty clear who these naysayers are, like me, because we hold the following views. They believe that they will live no longer than 100 years and quite possibly much less. 2, they believe that this limited longevity is only natural, but also desirable, both for themselves and everyone else. They believe that they are bigger than the change, the more likely resulting in harm. The harms will outweigh the benefits. It's them talking about us. So, suppose that they're wrong on all 3 counts. How are we to think about such beings who think in this way, limited? There are people who live in the space of their largely self-imposed limitations, which function as a self-fulfilling prophecy programmed for destruction, not genetically, but perhaps intellectually. Some of the more dramatic turn of mind would say that they are suicide bombers, trying to manufacture a climate of terror in humanity's existential horizons. They roam the earth as dead, waiting to happen. This much is clear. If you're a transhumanist, ordinary people are zombies. What do? You kill them, for once and all. You avoid them. You enable them to be fully alive. The decision here is not straightforward, as it might seem, because the prima facie easiest option, requires that there are no more resource implications. But of course, zombies require living humans, potentially transhumans, in order to exist in the manner in which they do, which in turn makes zombies dangerous. Hence, has always proved such an attractive option for dealing with zombies. After all, it is difficult to dictate the resources needed to secure the transhumanist goal of indefinite longevity. If there are zombies trying to anchor your existence, your your horizons in the present, to make their own lives as easy as possible, this kind of problem normally arises in the context of ecological sustainability. As care for the future generations, our greedy habits of mass consumption blind us to the long-term damage it is doing to the environment. However, the relevant sense of care in the transhumanist case relates to sustaining the investment-based need to reach a state of indefinite longevity. It may require diverting public resources from the seemingly more pressing needs, such as having a strong national defense, as a U.S. transhumanist party presidential candidate, Zoltan, his name's really Zoltan, is really running for your president, his stuff. He says you need more weapons. Now, it's certainly true that if people routinely lived indefinitely, then an existential character in the horror of war would be considerably reduced, which may in turn decrease both the likelihood and the cost of war. Maybe. So what about option number 3? Which is probably the most of us would find the most palatable, at least in principle. Here is a public problem, relations problem. One not so different from the development aid workers trying to persuade underdeveloped people and civilized people that their lives would be exceptionally improved by allowing their societies to be radically restructured so as to double their lifespan from 40 to 80. While such societies are by no means perfect, may require significant change to deliver what they promise. Nevertheless, doubling life expectancy would radically shift the rhythm of the individual collective cycle of life, which would prove threatening to some. And of course, the cost suggests here may be overstated, especially in a world where even the poor used to have decent access to global trends. Nevertheless, the checkered history of the development aid since the formal end of imperialism suggests that there is a little political will here, at least on the part of the Western nations, to invest in human and financial capital needed to persuade people in developing countries that greater longevity is in their own self-interest and not simply a pretext to have them work longer for someone else. We are being tested, my friends, strategically, dramatically, absolutely. It's shocking, isn't it? In an upcoming, probably in the next couple weeks, what I'm writing is called Inhuman, because the hybrid age is going exponential. The public just doesn't understand. People are completely unprepared for this. It's also being triggered by J-Town as well. They are so close already to untapping our very, what makes us alive, what makes us individual. And it looks like they've already gone past that because of something recent that has been posted. Again, from China, posted in the Washington Post, that they have gone too far, I think. Because in April 2015, a paper by Chinese scientists about their attempts to edit the DNA of a human embryo rocked the scientific world, set out a furious debate. Leading scientists warned altering the human genetic line without studying the consequences will have horrific consequences. Basically, that's what they said. Geneticists with good intentions could mistakenly engineer changes in the DNA that generate dangerous mutations, cause painful death. Scientists, countries with less noble intentions, could again try to build a race of superhumans or something else. Human DNA is, however, merely one of the commercial targets here that are of ethical concern. The DNA of every single organism, every plant, every animal, every bacterium is now fair game for genetic manipulation. We are entering the age of a backyard synthetic biology that should worry everybody. And it's coming about because of CRISPRs, clustered, regularly interspaced, short palindromic repeats. That's what it's short for. Because CRISPRs are cheap. They are easy to use. It has both revolutionized and brought genetic research into the hands of anyone. Hundreds, if not thousands of labs are now experimenting with CRISPR-based editing projects. A race is on between the major research institutions to file CRISPR technique patents. Research dollars, both public and private, pouring into these CRISPR projects. Meanwhile, a panoply, basically, of leading geneticists, including one of the researchers of the CRISPR technology, has urged for a moratorium on alterations to the human genome until implications of messing with this are further studied and safeguards put in place. But China has already done it. And we don't know what this one being will do to us. Changing human DNA creates, for scientists, humanity, a frightening and ethical gray zone. Does it not? Don't you think? This is a pretty big deal, guys. Isn't it? So, we don't know if one genetically modified being changes all of us. We don't know. But it's too late. This is a quick editing of the DNA of any organism in a lab. Because until recently, editing DNA required some sophistication, years of experiences, many thousands of dollars. CRISPR has changed all that. CRISPR's work by using an enzyme called Cas9. Might not be a big deal. But that homes in on specific location of a strand of a DNA. This process then edits the DNA to remove unwanted sequences or insert what they call payload sequences. CRISPRs use RNA molecule, so they are going right down to the mama. And they use that as a guide to the DNA target. To set up CRISPR editing capacity, a lab needs to order an RNA fragment. It costs about $10 and purchase off-the-shelf chemicals and enzymes for $30 or less. CRISPR is cheap. It's easy to use. It has revolutionized, changed genetic research. So, what have they made? Changing DNA creates, for scientists, humanity, something really scary. They're calling it a gray zone. What always makes me think back, the gray aliens are perhaps one of the futures where we become those things. Do we become those things because we CRISPR the sex right out of us? Is it one small being and then generations from now we become that? Because on one hand, for many millions of poor souls suffering from diseases arising from genetic defects, this and its research, it feels could find a cure for that problem in our lifetime. On the other hand, changing our human germline is risky without much knowledge of how our DNA works, because they are finding more sequences. And those scientists now say, they commonly sequence DNA. They struggle to understand how the different pieces of human genome work together. For example, until recently, scientists thought much of our genetic material was useless. They called it junk, remember? It was their junk. In a previous year, they might have considered editing out that junk. They might have. Now research is emerging to show that junk plays such a key role in regulating genetic expression, effectively turning genes on and off when needed. Regulation is fundamental to the biological process that govern our bodies, our endocrine system, perhaps the entire system in the fabric of the universe. What if a well-intentioned researcher develops a cure for one of these diseases, shares it with thousands of sufferers before realizing that the cure is worse than the disease and that the side effects are painful, maybe even deadly, and can easily spread from person to person to person? Such a scenario could arise through the best intentions, but in the hands of an evil, Darth Vader-ish, or an evil biohacker. These are powerful. These are simple tools that are cause for alarm. Smart biohacker could alter the flu genome, for example, making it more potent, setting off an epidemic that kills billions. Through a nuclear weapon, well, it could cause tremendous long-lasting damage. The ultimate biological doomsday machine is bacteria. And those idiots, scientists, have just activated something that's been dead for millions of years because they want to see what it's going to do. Bacteria is the doomsday machine because they spread so quickly and quietly. No one is prepared for an era when editing DNA is as easy as editing a Word document. Government does not have regulations on editing human DNA either. No government has. The ethical concerns have not been fleshed out. There is no centralized risk management inventory listing which labs are doing what with CRISPR. It's a little scary. Now, rarely do I argue that a moratorium on some sort of technical process is prudent. But the stakes in the case of CRISPR are so high that I believe this must be stopped. Rogue scientists may nonetheless continue to work on modifications on the gene, on the human germline, and that could endow them with a first mover advantage, unfair knowledge. If such a moratorium could be effective, as global moratorium of cloning humans has been, maybe, at least the scientists such as who engineered the human embryos in China could have become international pariahs rather than being celebrated for publishing papers in prestigious journals. Because we're here now. We're already here. It's pretty shocking, don't you think? That we're so close. Well, that's what I wanted to keep you a little longer for today. I don't want to bore you with going on and on and on. But this is crazy. This transhumanist stuff isn't just about the black goo, although that's real and it's programmable and possibly sentient. We know that we already have, what do we even call them? Living computers. We have this. We're not ready. I don't think. Do you guys think we're ready? I don't know. I would immediately say no. There's no way we're ready for this. I'm not even sure that, I don't know. This cache technology, I've told you before that it's bothered me a little bit. But I'm kind of looking at a genetic Armageddon. Whether it happens between the end of Jade Helm to 1 year. Is the zenith 2016? I'm thinking so, because in recent years, this field of genetic energy editing is off the charts. And yes, of course I want to cure cancer. Of course I'd like to fix MS. I'd like to fix all those faulty things. But, the side effects. And we are not, I don't know. We're just not, I don't see us being smart enough for this. I don't. Now, fixing the faulty genes sound all great. Conventional gene therapy is not without risk, but gene therapy, the risk of which are apparent generations down the line, it's an entirely different ballgame here. A patient can consent to treatment, but her great-great-great-granddaughter can't. The second objection is more profound. This is germline alteration. Used to eliminate disease could be used to make improvements. Designer baby arguments have so far applied to only a limited example of embryo screening here, in which embryos created during an IVF are tested, eliminated, if found to be carrying unwanted genetic anomalies. But genome editing reaches far past this. It might be possible not only to eliminate unfit, but to push desirable traits, intelligence, beauty, the correct sexuality, all of which have significant genetic components here. This genetic utopia is looking a little bit more like hell on earth. We don't know if these things that we are born with are fixed. If we need a certain kind of people, if certain people have to carry a certain illness. What if you have to? But of course, we are all these things. We are cells, we are proteins, we are elements, we are collectively this human genome, because we are. It is undeniable that at the very core of our being lies this genome, the master code of our species. Many scientists say that technology now allows us to make improvements, to edit it, to improve upon nature, possibly eliminate any kind of genetic diseases. Who does not want to end cystic fibrosis? Improve cognitive function, improve life expectancy. It's seductive. This week, however, a call for caution by some of the world's leading research funders was made. This is not an argument against playing God. Humans have been undoing the work of the Almighty ever since we invented medicine, reduced infant mortality rates. Neither is it an argument against genetic tinkering per se. There is nothing mystical or sacred about this. The calls, these are calls from scientists to ban genetic modifications of wheat plants to enable them to thrive without the use of harmful pesticides, are spacious, motivated by silly superstition maybe. But the human genome is different. It is quite literally who and what we are. Alter the genetic code present in any one of us, in the germline cells. That's the sperm and the eggs, guys, if you didn't know what I meant. This germline. This is the basic. This is mommy daddy. The changes are carried out into future generations. If this can be used to eliminate diseases, what is the harm? Because the Academy of Medical Science calls this an urgent national debate. Must be done now. And this might seem silly. After all, the first draft of the human genome was published 15 years ago. And to date, the promised genetic revolution has not come. But in recent years, the progress has been exponential. Using these same techniques, it's possible to alter specifically the genes of germline cells, of embryos. These changes will be passed on. There are two potential problems here, one practical, one philosophical, I guess. The first, unintended consequences, fixing faulty genes. Side effects. Conventional gene therapy is risky. A patient can consent. Again, 7 generations from now, they can't. Second objection is more profound here. Germline alterations can be used to eliminate disease. They can be used to make improvements. They could stop unwanted genetic anomalies, desirable traits. No one would mourn the elimination of hemophilia. But what about Down syndrome? What about autism? What about dwarfism? Are Down syndrome people ill? Are they sick? Or on the spectrum of what is to be human? Anyone with an ounce of humanity, I think, would say the latter. We are a long way from all this being a reality. Scientists are right in saying we should be talking about this now. A world free of genetic disease, full of bright, beautiful, fit, may sound like heaven, but in reality, it could resemble another place altogether, and not one that I'm willing to go. Something to think about, guys, and thanks for hanging.